Hello, this is Craig Wescoe recording for tcgplayer.com, and today we're going to be playing Modern Esper Control. So this is a deck that has gained quite a bit since the printing of Fatal Push. Without Fatal Push, it was very reliant on 4 Path to Exile, which is generally not the type of card you want to play on the first and second turn of the game, because then they get to ramp. Whereas Fatal Push, you get to kill their early creature without accelerating them, and so you can stay underneath them and use all your counter spells to counter their later threats. So Fatal Push has been a huge upgrade to this deck, and so I wanted to revisit it and record a video. Owen Turtenwald was actually the motivation for this. He said, the best thing for me to do specifically as a player is to play blue control decks in Modern and just jam it to get more experience, since obviously I have a bias for white aggro decks. So we'll see today if I was able to live up to his expectations. So basically this deck, it has a ton of removal spells and a bunch of counter spells and a bunch of card advantage. So the idea is to just trade resources 1-for-1 with whatever the opponent's doing, and then in the later game, pull ahead with cards like Sphinx's Revelation in the card advantage department to just kind of close out the game. The win conditions in the deck are pretty minimal because we don't really need a fast clock since we're the control deck in every matchup. So we have 4 Colonnades, 2 Secure the Waste, and 4 Snapcaster Mage. So we have 10 ways to actually kill the opponent. But that's fine because we don't need a lot of pressure. A lot of times, once we get into the late game, we'll just play Secure the Waste for like 7 or 8, and then kill the opponent in 2 or 3 turns after we've established control. Or we'll just peck away with Colonnade starting on turn 15, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, they're dead. So it's kind of inconsequential a lot of the time when and how we actually kill the opponent. And a lot of times the opponent just concedes when we Sphinx's Revelation for 7 and they have no cards in hand. So we don't even, a lot of times, even need that. So Secure the Waste is the win condition of choice because we can flash it back with Snapcaster Mage, and it does do a lot on defense. So we can play it to chump block to buy us time. We can trade off with multiple attackers. So it's just the best win condition in a deck that already wants Snapcaster Mage. And Colonnade is just kind of incidental value. It's a land that turns into a win condition. And we already want dual lands given our 3-color nature. That's pretty mana intensive on blue and white mana, especially blue. So the actual spells in the deck, we have 6 1-mana removal spells, which allows us to keep up with all the fast decks like Death Shadow, Goblin Guide decks, Tarmogoyf decks, stuff like that. And then we have 4 Snapcaster Mage to snap back these removal spells. So we almost always have at least 2 ways to cheaply and efficiently deal with their first couple of threats. And then beyond that, if they're playing a go wide strategy with like a bunch of Birds of Paradise and just playing a whole bunch of creatures on the battlefield, like Collected Company, or if they're an elf deck, or if they are Affinity and they just dump their hand on the table and have a bunch of threats, then Supreme Verdict cleans that up. And even against Merfolk, the can't be countered clause can sometimes come up, especially in post-board games. So Supreme Verdict is kind of the perfect sweeper, especially in this style of deck. And when we combine it with this cheap early interaction, it's unlikely that they're able to amass enough pressure to kill us before we get to 4 mana to cast our Verdict. Cryptic Command can also buy us time. Tap down your board and draw a card. Combined with Snapcaster Mage, we can chain those together for a little while until we actually find our Supreme Verdict. And for card draw, to kind of smooth out our draws and to gain 2-for-1 advantages after we're Fatal Pushing and Path to Exiling and Verdict away all their threats, we use 4 Think Twice, which is just, all right, you didn't do anything, great, I'll draw a card. I'm not going to waste my mana in my turn. And then you can flash it back for 3 to draw another card, so it is eventually a 2-for-1. Esper Charm also draw 2 cards. Sometimes the destroy target enchantment comes up. I played against a fairies deck where killing a bitter blossom was important. Sometimes you can kill various other incidental things. But usually the two modes are draw cards or discard cards. So a lot of times a line of play that comes up is the opponent has like 4 cards in hand and they say go. We go, all right, end step, Esper Charm, discard 2, untap, Snapcaster Mage, flashing back Esper Charm, discard your last 2 cards. So we effectively mind twist them for 4 cards between their end step and our main phase. The other thing that I'll often do, if the opponent's down to 1 card in hand, then I'll wait till their draw step, and after they draw, I Esper Charm them inside their draw step to discard the card they just drew and the last card that was in their hand. So Esper Charm does empty the opponent's hand a lot of the time, and that'll clear the way for us to resolve things like Sphinx's Revelation, to just kind of put the game out of reach, and it forces the opponent to have to counter the Esper Charm with their last counter, because otherwise they just have to discard it against decks that have counter spells. And another trick that we can do to kind of pull ahead in the late game is Cryptic Command and Snapcaster Mage. So you can Cryptic Command, counter your spell, draw a card, and then you go, all right, Snapcaster Mage, targeting Cryptic Command like on the next turn to counter your next spell, but then instead of just drawing a card off the Cryptic Command, you can use the mode of return target permanent and target the Snapcaster Mage. So then you counter their spell and bounce the Snapcaster Mage. So then the next spell they play, you can play Snapcaster Mage, and if you have another Cryptic Command in the graveyard, you can do the same thing, or you can use that Snapcaster Mage to buy back like a Logic Knot or a Negate to counter their spell, or a Fatal Push to kill their creature if it's a creature, or even use Snapcaster Mage to flashback Secure the Waste. Maybe the first Secure the Waste was to try to stabilize the board and trade with their threats that were attacking you, and now it's just because they have no cards in hand and we want to close the door in 2 to 3 turns. So you Snapcast, Secure the Waste for like 4 or 5. Now suddenly we have 6 or 7 power worth of creatures spread across, 5 different threats. So that's another thing we can do. So basically the deck is just a bunch of card advantage, card draw, creature kill, and just a lot of really versatile cards. Like 3 Logic Knot, 4 Cryptic Command, and 2 Negate means we have 9 counter spells, which most of them are pretty hard counters aside from Negate. So Logic Knot and Cryptic can just literally counter anything. And they're always going to be good later in the game, as long as the opponent doesn't have like a Cavern of Souls or something. And then out of the sideboard, we get things like more Path to Exiles, in case we need more 1-mana removal spells. And we get Stony Silence against Tron and Lantern and Affinity, decks that just really rely on artifacts. Rune to Halo is kind of a removal spell that can also come in when we take out our removal spells. So against a deck like Infect, it's a way to deal with whatever threat they have, where you can take out essentially 2 Tarmogoyfs or 2 Death Shadows at once with 1 card. It's super good against Eidolon of the Great Revel, because you play it, you name Eidolon of the Great Revel, and then it prevents all the damage from the Eidolon attacking you. It prevents all the damage from the Eidolon dealing you damage when you cast a spell. And the opponent still takes damage from their own Eidolon whenever they cast a spell. So it's just like makes the Eidolon a liability for the opponent, to where it might get to a point where they're like, all right, well, I'm going to bolt my own Eidolon just because I'm about to kill myself. So that's kind of interesting. And then Timely Reinforcements comes in against any deck with pressure, burn spells, stuff like that. Also, Rune Halo is good against Valakut the Molten Pinnacle. Since we don't really have creature threats, just name Valakut the Molten Pinnacle, and then it kind of shuts off that game plan and makes it a lot easier to win. Crumble to Dust is our card against Tron and against, I guess, also Valakut. We don't bring it in as a value card. It's specifically for those decks that go big with their mana and try to win with their mana. and it's the one reason we splash the steam vents that we can fetch. Thoughtseize is a card that I bring in quite a bit, and it just depends on what I want to bring out. So a lot of times when I bring out some combination of Supreme Verdict, Fatal Push, Path to Exile, then I'll bring in cards like Thoughtseize, Ruined Halo, and then what other card is specific to the matchup, like Negate or Crumble to Dust or Relic or something like that. And then sometimes you can cut down on some of the counter magic or some of the expensive spells. A lot of times I can cut a Sphinx's Revelation if I feel like I don't need the life gain or the way to pull ahead in the late game as much. Yeah, so basically this deck, it's not quite tier 1 yet, but I think that might have to do more with the fact that people haven't played enough with Fatal Push in this shell, rather than the deck is lacking, the power of competing with tier 1 strategies. Now, again, it's kind of early, but this is definitely a deck that's on my radar, and if it's on my radar, it should probably be on your radar as well. So let's try this out and see how we do.